So the moniker I've been using is the relationship wizard. So there's a bit of a history in my background about wizards, but anyway, the thing I like about it is that the wizard points the way. Somebody else has to do the work. I was a big fan of Mary Stuart, and she wrote the books about King Arthur, and his wizard was Merlin. But Merlin just points to the sword in the stone, and somebody else has to pull it out. So I just point the way, and you have to do the work. But the other thing about the word is that there's a bit of mystery and magic to it. And I after 30 years of doing this, there's still some magic and mystery when people catch the idea that they can have a great relationship and have the relationship they want. It's not rocket science, but there's some things you have to do and some things you can't do. So my story is I trained with Harville Hendrix. Harville Hendrix is the creator of Imago Relationship Therapy. And like I said, I'm a coach. I can coach hockey. I didn't invent hockey. I didn't invent this stuff, but I can coach it. But I believe that he's really cracked the code on relationships. And you'll see why as we go through. And so my job, as I see it, is to get the information out to as many people as I can. And obviously with the internet and Zoom and all this, it might make this easier than seeing people one-to-one in my office. But an issue that always comes up, obviously, is communication. And honest to God, and you'll see why, my job really is to get two people to talk to each other in a safe way. And I can do that. I can coach them. And then once they can do that, then they don't need me, because I'm really not asking them to do anything that I don't do with my wife. And I suppose my story is that, 32 years ago now, my wife and I separated. We'd been married for 15 years at the time. And it was over. We had the two kids, we're meeting regarding the kids, but the relationship was over. And it was really my wife who read Harville's book first, the Getting the Love You Want, a guide for couples. And one of the points Harville makes is that what often happens in our culture is we get rid of our partner, but we keep the problem. And so we both said, well, that makes sense. So we said, let's not waste that 15-year history. Let's figure out what didn't work so we don't repeat the pattern. Anyway, 4 months later, we're back together. 2 months later, we went down to Chicago to a workshop Harville gave. And I said, this guy makes a ton of sense. So I went to New York and trained with Harville. And then 2 years later, went back to train at the workshops. So I've been doing the same workshops around the States and Canada that he did in Chicago. But I'm not doing them now, but for 20 years, I did a lot of them. And I tell people, I say, if you're going to work with me, this is what you're going to get. Intellectually, it makes sense to me. My wife and I are celebrating our 46th anniversary. Wouldn't have happened without this. But I've also seen it play itself in my office for the last 30-some years. So that's what I want to share with you today, and hopefully it'll make sense. So let me go back. There's Harville and I 30 years ago. I had hair and he didn't have a beard. So, but that's the book, Getting the Love You Want. And like I guess it says here, he sold over 4 million copies, and he's trained about 2,500 of us around the world doing this work in 59 countries. I was actually the first international guy he trained, but now it's in, like I said, in 59 countries. So it's not just me, it's just a system that's helped a lot of people. All right. And it's when I was coaching hockey, I coached at St. Clair College. When all the colleges had team, I coached hockey at St. Clair, and we would get players from Essex and Riverside and Chatham and all up and down the 401 corridor, and they all had their own system. But when they came to the college, I wanted them to use our system. And so the same with if a couple is going to work with me, this is the system I want them to use. And I'm biased, but I think it's the best understanding we have of relationships in today's world. And it's not me. This guy that I'm talking to there is a genius. And he and his wife, I think, really have cracked the code on relationships. But once you get that, things seem to make a bit more sense. So that's my business card. And I truly believe the tools are available in today's world to have the relationship of your dreams. And, I often ask couples, on a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate your relationship? 10 being the best, 1 not so good. And I believe that couples can be at a 9 or 10 all the time. So I guess this masterclass, and when I work with couples, if my job, my goal is to get them at a 9 or a 10, and I think they can be there all the time. So that's what this is all about. And when I say Harville has cracked the code on relationships, I liken it to like a combination lock. You know, once you know the combination, much easier to open the lock. You know, you can fiddle around even with 5 numbers for a long time before you get it open. But if you know the right combination and the way the digits fall in, much easier to open the lock. And I think that, like I said, I think Harville has really cracked the code on relationships. So there's going to be 5 pieces to this a puzzle. And for me, safety is a key one. They're all important. This is the one I sort of highlight. I think it really is the key of the whole deal, and partly because it's just hardwired into who we are. Because if you look at our human brain, hopefully all you out there and me, we're using that convoluted part up at the top, the cerebral cortex part of our brain. But we all have this midbrain, which does all kinds of things. But we also have the brain stem that comes up through the back of the neck, the spinal cord, medulla, the pons in there. And the brain stem, science tells us that we share with all animals. All animals have a brain stem. And they call it the reptilian brain, the old brain, the brain stem. But birds, fish, mammals, reptiles have a brain stem. And that goes back 500 million years. You're not going to change it. You know, but here's my challenge. If you think about how relationships are depicted often in our culture, movies, TV, those magazines at the checkout counter, but in real life, but think about it from your old brain point of view. If you attack me or yell at me or don't talk or shut down and make fun of me, what am I going to do except defend myself? You see it everywhere. And all I'm saying, it doesn't work. So again, like my job really in the office is to get 2 people to talk to each other, but in a safe way, because if you don't feel safe, you'll defend. And I know that sounds simple, but after 30 years, I really think this is the key. And, you know, we live in LaSalle here, or just close to LaSalle in Windsor. We're right by the nature park there. There's 500 acres of bush behind us, lots of animals. But those animals are always on the alert for danger, because the danger can kill them. They like the good stuff, but they're always on the lookout for danger. And we're the same. And I'm not knocking my old brain, my brain stem. If I'm out in the 401, I want to be pretty alert. I just don't want it to run my marriage. And I would characterize most relationships, certainly ours was before we started doing this work. They're unconscious, they're old brain, they're reactive. You know, your partner does something and it's a reactive response. And the reactive responses are typically the fight or flight. We've all heard that. We explode our energy out. Or we constrict our energy and we hide or we freeze or we submit. So those are reactive responses just trying to keep us alive. Our old brain is just trying to keep us alive. And then what often happens is that they marry each other. And I don't know about you, but most relationships, if there's an issue, one person tends to be on the side of talk to me, talk to me, talk to me. The other person tends to be on the side of leave me alone, leave me alone, leave me alone. And that in itself is one of the causes of the power struggle. It's not the only cause, but it's one of the causes, that it's a reactive response to danger. You know, and later on, you'll see there's a slide there. Harville used the analogy of a turtle in a hailstorm. You know, the hailstorm says to the turtle, talk to me, talk to me, talk to me. I was certainly the turtle in our relationship. What am I doing except going deeper and deeper in my shell, because that's where it was safe. And that goes way back. Like, you know, my dad died when I was 5. During the war, I'm sent to a military boarding school. So I'm 5 years old, dormitory of 40 kids. You know, where do you show your little hurts to? You don't. You step by line, you get smacked. You know, I'm sure I got smacked a lot. But anyway, I shut that down a long time ago. You know, and I liked the boarding school. I had a lot of friends, played a lot of sports. But in hindsight, certainly didn't learn how to deal with feelings very well. So I would shut down. That was my reactive response. I'm like the turtle, you know, going inside my shell, because that's where I was safe. There was no kindergarten back then. They put me in grade 1. I'm a small 5. Everybody else was 6. I just learned to stay below the radar. But it wasn't working in our relationship. Now, once that becomes conscious and I become aware, I can keep doing it, or I can do it differently. And that's going to be the choice. And that's really what this is all about, is that we have choices. But once we understand the different pieces of the puzzle, it just makes things a bit easier. So this is the first piece, that the importance of safety. And for me, it's a really important piece. So, oh yeah, there's my turtle. So there's a turtle, the hailstorm's hailing. And now if I stuck my finger, if that was a snapping turtle, if I stuck my finger in its nose, he could bite it off. But the first reaction is to shut down. Actually, we were up, this is years ago, we were camping with the kids, and there's a big old snapping turtle, and I just dropped a little pebble on its shell, and its first initial response was to shut down, just like that guy. But I know if I stuck my finger in his nose, he could bite it off. So that's so we'll go back. That's the first one, the safety. Now the second piece is the Imago system, and it's counterintuitive, but to me it makes sense. And this is the key insight. So again, is one more important than the other? They're all important, but I think this is the one that helps explain the problems that crop up in relationships, because Harville, I think, was struggling with two things 40 years ago. One was he went through a long, painful divorce himself, and the other thing he was looking at are the statistics on divorce, and he was trying to make sense of it. And actually, he literally came from the divorce court. He was teaching a class in family therapy down in Texas, and one of his students, or he was devastated, and he asked his class, he says, "Are any of you experiencing problems in your intimate relationship?" All 16 hands went up. And one of the students asked him, "Why, sir?" And he says, "I have no idea, but I'll spend the rest of my life trying to figure it out." And so his theory is, now think about it, it's a bit counterintuitive, but it makes sense, because, and A, would you agree your parents weren't perfect? We're not perfect. No, nobody's perfect. We all have positive and negative traits. This is not about blaming parents, but your parents, my parents, your parents, they weren't perfect. And Harville's insight, he and his wife, that as children, we form an image of the person who makes us whole. It's unconscious, it's not conscious, but it's made up of the positive and negatives of our parents. And to me, it just makes sense. You can't live with somebody for 18 years and not be influenced by them. But the problem is that, for whatever reason, people, when they fall in love, it's the positives. This person's going to meet all my needs, and it feels great. Where it starts to unravel a bit is that if there are negative traits, which there always are, then they start to show up. And that's when people get stuck in what we call the power struggle. And the power struggle tends to be, I'm right, you're wrong. So I think if we can reframe that and see it that, you're with the right person, but there's going to be some stretching to do, because none of us are perfect. None of our parents are perfect. We all have weak suits. Now, but here's the problem. Think about it. If my wife did not get certain needs met growing up, well, I'll use her as an example. So she grew up in an alcoholic home. From her perspective, her father was not there for her emotionally. Okay. Who does she marry? Someone who can't meet her emotional needs. I shut down the feeling part of me way back. So it can look totally different on the outside, but it was the same wound for her. I was not there for her emotionally. Now, when it stayed unconscious, it became a source of conflict. But as I became more conscious, and you recognize that, oh, okay. So as I consciously stretch to meet her needs in the feeling area, I'm also healing myself. It's a win-win. You're with the right person, but don't be surprised if your partner is going to ask for, your weak suit. But if you can reframe it and see it, it's a chance to go to more wholeness. We get a second chance, and I believe that, over 30 years, it didn't take 30 years. Most of my needs have been met. Most of her needs have been met. Pretty nice place to be. You just hang out and it gets better and better. But you have to be aware, you have to be conscious. Okay. So it's not about blaming, but it's now. So I'll ask you two questions. First one, you don't have to answer. Second one, you can. But if you're with a partner, the question is, why are you with that person? It's not a bad question, because most guys have met other girls growing up. Most girls have met other guys. So why you two? Why am I with Crystal? Why is anybody with anybody? Not a bad question. But here's the second question. Can you remember when you first met your partner? Everybody I asked that question to can. I can't remember what I did yesterday, but I can remember 50 years ago when I met Chris. So what's going on? And I think on an unconscious level, it's unconscious. We recognize something that's familiar. And if you think about it from a theological point of view, for me, it's sort of God's grace at the DNA level. You know, you're of all the people you're going to be partnered with, you're partnered with somebody. If you can get it right, if you can reframe it and be more conscious, you're with somebody who can help you become more whole. But you have to be aware. You have to be conscious. Anyway, so that's one piece, and then the other piece is that so as kids, we all have this core energy, and then we learn how to think and feel and act and sense. And so if I, you know, going back to using myself as an example, the most damage for me was probably in the feeling function. You know, I didn't learn how to deal with feelings very well as a kid in the boarding school, growing up, all that stuff. And who do I marry? Someone who wants, you know, some feeling from me. Now, here's where I do ask people to go with me a bit on this, and you can say yes, yay or nay on this. But I believe that we, all of us that are watching this and myself, are part of something much bigger. There's a bigger universe out there. And you can call it God or consciousness or the universe or nature, whatever you want to call it, but it's bigger than us. And there seems to be something about nature that wants wholeness. It wants to be complete. You know, if I cut myself, it just starts to heal. I don't have to tell my body anything. It just starts to heal. We screw up the ozone layer. There's something about nature that wants wholeness. And if that's true, and I think it is. And so if the most damage for me, was in the feeling function, and if nature or God or the universe is trying to heal that, who would you guess I'd be attracted to? Someone whose feeling side is more developed or less developed? And most people would say more. And that's certainly what happened in us, and that's certainly what I see in the office all the time. You know, but you know, think about it. I'm attracted, or she's attracted, or I'm attracted to her feeling, but I don't have the tools, the experience, the equipment to deal with her very legitimate feeling needs if it remains unconscious. But if I can become conscious and become aware and reframe it as I stretch to meet her needs, in her legitimate needs in the feeling area, I really am healing myself. So for me, it is a win-win, but you have to be aware, you have to be conscious. So that's a key piece, you know, but once you understand that, it's like, you know, things start to make a little bit more sense. But let me just, here's the example of stretching. As I stretch to meet her needs in the feeling area, I really am healing myself. That would be the expression we use, the idea of stretching. But I want to give you a couple of examples of how it shows up in a relationship. So I had a couple of great examples in the last couple of weeks. But one was, there was a couple in the office, and the girl brought up an issue. It was not about her partner. It was just an issue. And she explained to her partner, and he understood it. And so then it came his turn to talk. And knowing how competent she is, he said something like, "Hey, don't worry about it. It's nothing, you can handle it." And her whole demeanor shifted. I saw it. I was watching. And I asked her, I said, "What just happened?" And she said, "I felt dismissed." That was not his intention. He was trying to support her, but he said, "Oh, don't worry about it. It's nothing." And she felt that, you know, it wasn't heard, it wasn't important what you had to say. So I asked her, because I understand this process. I said, "Well, as a kid, did you ever feel dismissed?" All the time. What she had to say wasn't heard, wasn't important. She just didn't feel heard. So that's how it shows up in a relationship. And before it became conscious, because they'd been married about 15 years, and it happened in the past. And she would shut down. He'd wonder what the heck just happened. And then they don't talk for 2 days. But once they brought it to consciousness, and he realized that what he said or how he said it, it made her feel dismissed. It was not his intention, but that's the feeling that got triggered. But it was an old feeling. So now they can learn to talk to each other about it and shift the way they deal with that. And they can do that, but it has to be conscious. They have to be aware. So that was one example. Another example was, again, a girl who, I think she was the 8th or 9th of 10 kids, and as a child didn't feel heard or didn't feel seen, or heard probably too, but didn't feel seen or heard. So what happens? Her partner makes a fairly important decision without telling her. He thought he was doing her a favor. It didn't come over like that to her. Because again, she felt not heard, not seen. Who am I? Just, chopped liver. What's going on? And again, not his intention. He was trying to help her, but unconsciously, an old, you can call it a wound or a challenge from childhood gets re-triggered. In an unconscious relationship, she would either shut down or attack, and it can go south pretty quickly. So that's all I'm saying, is that don't be surprised when issues show up in the relationship. And it doesn't mean you have to do a lot of work about your childhood and this and this and this and this. But when it shows up in the relationship, then now you have to deal with it, because it will show up. But once they understood that, and so then her husband can be very conscious about not being dismissive of his wife, and making sure he supports her and listens and encourages her. And in the other situation where, he can involve her and get her opinion and be conscious of doing that, then it starts to heal those old issues. Then once they're healed, like, that it doesn't feel, it shifts, things shift, but you have to be aware, you have to be conscious. But that's how it shows up. So don't be surprised, is all I'm saying. So, and half of what I do in the office, I tell people, is it just help become what's unconscious become conscious. And the unconscious I trained as an Adlerian psychologist before I trained with Harville, and for Adler, the unconscious is not like something that can't be uncovered or known. More like Freud. For Freud, it was pretty mysterious and unknown. For Adler, it was just below the surface, but you haven't languaged it yet, but you can bring it up to consciousness. And so half of what I do is help people to step back and look at the relationship and see what's going on. If things are, what they're doing is counterproductive, then they can look at that and say, well, that's not working. And I use myself as an example. Like for 15 years, if my wife came on too strong, I would shut down. Well, if I step back and look at that, pretty counterproductive. I did it for a long time, but once you step back and see and make it more conscious, they say, okay, well, I can do it different. I can stick my nose out. If I'm the turtle, I can stick my nose out a bit. And if you're the hailstorm, you maybe can back off a bit. So that's the big shift. That's the reframe. It's huge. And once you understand your relationship, it's about finishing childhood. That all of us, it's not about blaming. It's just saying all of our needs weren't met. And all I'm saying is it probably show up in the relationship. But if you can get it right, then your partner can help you to heal that. So the shift is you've married your healer, but again, you have to be conscious. You have to be aware. So then that's the second piece. So the first piece, and you start to see how they start to fit together, but it has to be safe, because if you don't feel safe, you'll defend. But stuff's going to happen in the relationship. So when that girl felt dismissed and shut down, then he didn't feel safe, not in the sense of danger, but just that something didn't work, and so then they would both shut down. So the second piece, so the first piece is the safety. The second piece is don't be surprised if issues are going to show up in the relationship. Now you have to talk about it, and that's the third piece is it's a key skill. You have to learn to talk to each other in a safe way. It's a fundamental skill. And as a coach, I was always a fundamental kind of guy. I figured if we did the fundamentals well, we'd win games. And in football, I was a line coach. If my guys could block and tackle, we win games, and we did. In hockey, if you can pass and skate and check and shoot, you'll win games, and we did. And here, if you can learn to talk to each other in a safe way, you'll win. But you can attack or withdraw. And I tell people now, there's a process I'll explain here coming up that we all use as Imago therapists. But in 59 countries, 2,500 of us, and now actually Harville and Helen are taking that out into the wider arena, and they're calling it safe conversations. But it's something we've used in the office all the time. But I tell people, if you can figure out another way to talk to each other in a safe way, do that. I don't care. But you have to learn to talk to each other in a safe way. And this process ensures safety. It's a structured process, but it ensures safety. And again, that's the key piece for me is the safety. So the first step is sympathy mirror. And this is not new with Hendrix. It's been around for a long time. and all I'm saying, it works. And what's the word I want? It's slow, cumbersome, I guess. It's slow, it's cumbersome. But it works because you have to slow down that reactive old brain, because your reactive old brain wants to defend itself. So the first step is simply to mirror. So if I say something to my partner, before she can say anything, she needs to mirror back to make sure she heard me. And I'll say, yeah, that's exactly what I said, or here's a piece you missed. And sometimes it's only a word, but it could be an important one. So the mirroring, just you're trying to slow down that reactive old brain of yours, just to make sure you heard each other. Now, when I was writing my book and I was on this chapter, my wife and I, we went to Tim Hortons, and in the drive-through, I asked for a small black coffee. She asked for a medium decaf with milk. What did the guy on the inside do right away? Was that a small black and a medium decaf with milk? He mirrored it back. They're just trying to, cut down on wasting, but he just wanted to make sure he heard me. And surely to God, if they can use that Tim Hortons, if there's an issue in a relationship, you just want to make sure you hear your partner, because they might be coming at it from a different. Well, go back to that dismiss. Let's go to the next one, because that ties in even more here. The next step is the validation. And the validation step is once the person's done talking, they've been mirrored back, then, so I'll use my wife and I. So I'm talking to her, she mirrors me back, mirrors me back, mirrors me back. I'm done talking. At that point, I need her to say, it makes sense. That's what you'd say, or that's how you'd see it. She doesn't have to agree with me, but she's seen it from my point of view. Like the guy inside, he's not going to say, hey, you don't want a black coffee, you want a double. No, that's what he might want, but he's validating what I want. So go back to the girl that felt dismissed. Does it make sense that she felt dismissed when he said, oh, don't worry about it, it's nothing? Because of her childhood, that she didn't feel heard or seen. So that was not his intention, but it makes sense that that's what she felt. And then she could turn around and say, yeah, it makes sense. You weren't trying to put me down. You were trying to support me. That makes sense. But something didn't work. And that's what we have to do. That's where the safe conversations, the intentional dialogue process comes in, so they can sort things out. And then they can figure out, next time this shows up, how can they do it differently? Or if it does show up, how can they minimize the impact of it? So it's a structured process, but it works. And I tell couples, I say, look, the sooner you go home, and because we use it in the office all the time, but as soon as they can go home and use something and solve something, even something very small, using the process, they start to trust the process. This works. And then pretty soon you can talk to each other about anything, because it takes things out of the power struggle. It doesn't make one right or one wrong. The validation doesn't make her right because she felt dismissed, or doesn't make him right because he wasn't trying to do that. It just, something didn't work. But once they talk to each other about it, it makes sense. Okay, how can we do it differently? We're not getting into solutions yet, but there's two ways, it seems to me. The one is even, in a more conscious way, even if my partner did the same thing, what could I do to get a different outcome? Not easy, but it's possible. Even if my wife did something in the past would take us down the rabbit hole, what can I do so we don't go there? And the other way would be, well, it'd be more helpful to me if you did A, B, and C. And she could say, well, it'd be more helpful if you did D and F. And again, the key is not for the next 15 years, but try it for a week, see if it works better. I had a couple in here yesterday, and I'm not sure it's going to work, but they're going to try something for a week. And they're both a little hesitant about it, but we'll see. If it doesn't work, we'll throw it out, we'll try something else. So, but remember, we say if you stop and look at if they're counterproductive behaviors, you don't want to keep doing that. So you step back, you look at it, and then you find a way, okay, let's try this, see if it works a little bit better. If it does, great. If it doesn't, we'll try something else. And then the third step, so the mirroring, the validation, and the last step is the empathy, which is getting in touch with the feelings. The other part's more of the thinking, but here's you're trying to get at the feeling. So when she felt dismissed, he could say, well, you felt dismissed, but you felt maybe hurt or angry or sad or unimportant or whatever. And she could tell him what she was feeling. So it gets you in touch with what your partner, the feeling side of it, not just the thinking side. All right. So it is a structured process. There's no doubt about it, but it works. And I'm not asking you to do it all the time, but if there's an issue, it's a great way it's a great tool to have in your toolkit. So first of all, to mirror, just make sure you hear each other, to validate that makes sense. That's what's going on for you. And if it doesn't, you have to need more information. And here's what you're probably feeling. And it's a dialogue. So then the other person does the same thing, and back and forth it goes until they come to a solution. So that's the third piece, okay? The third piece of the puzzle. And it was really Harville's wife, Helen, who way back said that, in a sense, you've dethroned the therapist, because traditionally you go to therapy for healing. And she's saying, no, the healing takes place in the couple. And again, going back to my training as an Adlerian psychologist, if you think of, Adler was a contemporary of Freud's, and obviously Freud's the grandfather of modern psychology, has influenced our culture immensely. But if you think of a Freudian office, even now, sometimes stereotypically, you'll see somebody on a couch and the therapist behind taking notes. But the connotation is very clear. You're the patient, I'm the doctor. There's something wrong with you, and I'll fix it. Whereas for Adler, his take on life was that, as a child, by the time we're 4 or 5 or 6, we figured out how to fit into our little family of origin. I have a 5-year-old granddaughter, and she knows how to get the other guys going, the other kids, or how to get attention, how to get the parents to do what she wants, or her grandmother, especially my wife, she has her wrapped around her little finger. So she's figured it out, as we all have. And Adler likened that to a map, like a very accurate map, say, of Windsor. And then what brings people into my office at 30 or 40 or 50 or 60 is that metaphorically they're in Toronto, but they're still using their Windsor map. But his take on it wasn't that there's something wrong with you, like, you're the patient, I'm the doctor, but he would say, well, what you learned at 4 or 5 isn't working. You can keep doing it, or you can step back and say, well, it's not working. So how can I do it differently? Quite a different take on therapy. And for me, it's just much more optimistic. Adler has this great saying, it's not what you possess, it's how you use it. It's not what you possess, it's how you use it. And I always use the example of Terry Fox. A young kid loses leg to cancer, decides to run across Canada. Another young kid loses leg to cancer, poor me, life sucks. They both possess the same thing, use it quite differently. Can't do anything about the loss of leg of the cancer. And you or I, we can't do anything that's happened to right now, to this moment. But what we do from here forward, we have more choice over. So for me, it's just much more optimistic. But again, the great thing there is that the healing takes place between the partners, moving from unconscious to conscious, from pain out into pleasure out. Okay, so that's the third piece. So we got 3 pieces so far of the puzzle, 2 more to go. So safety, to me, that's critical, because if you don't feel safe, you'll defend yourself. 500 million years. 2, Harville and Helen have counterintuitively figured out you're probably with somebody who will have some of both the positive but also negative traits of your parents. The things you want most from your partner probably can't give you right now. But as they become conscious and stretch to meet your needs, then they heal, you heal. But the third thing is you have to learn to talk to each other in a safe way. Now, the space between, this is really an emphasis in the last book. The book that I showed you there is the 2018 edition. So the first book, Getting Love You Want, was 1988. Then they republished it 2008, and then the third edition, 2018. And between 2008 2018, their study of quantum physics has really influenced this piece right here, the next 2 pieces actually. And typically when you think of a relationship, you think of you and you, 2 people. But there's an energy field between you, isn't it? And you can tell when there's tension. And if I ask couples that, they all know, that when things are tense or when things are good. We have sayings like you can cut the tension with a knife. But it's more than just a saying, because if quantum physics tells us, and I'm not an expert on this for sure, but Einstein says that everything, if we break it down, is simply energy, and it's all connected. So that there's a real energy field between you, and everything's connected. And so if the analogy I use is light, if I shine light at my partner, they can't block it. It's just energy. it's just there. And so if you put negativity into the space between, your partner can't block it. It's going to affect them. And so we're saying that you want to think of your relationship as not just the two of you, but that energy field between you, the space between, and no blame, shame, or criticism in that space between. And I think this is the one that couples are having the most problems with, because I think in a large part, it's unconscious. They're not even aware. And when I first, because again, this is relatively new when the book came out in 2018. So it's only 2 or 3 years that I've had time to reflect on this. And I think I originally thought that, well, you've been married for 5 or 10 years, you probably built up some bad habits. You probably have. But I think it goes back farther now to those first 18 years, because a lot of us did grow up in homes where there was negativity and there was criticism. And I think our culture is pretty negative, pretty critical. And we just think it's normal. But then we bring it into the relationship, it doesn't work. It's like that being dismissed. They weren't aware. But if you bring that into the relationship, it causes friction. It's negative, and you can't block it. It's just there. And what happens, I think, is that I think in the romantic love stage of relationship, that energy field is pretty positive. It's new, it's exciting, it's fun, it's romantic. And then I think it's little things, but there's a little zing here, a little criticism there, roll your eyes, walk away, whatever. And then what happens is that the energy field becomes more negative. And if it becomes too toxic, people start to avoid. Why would I go into a toxic field? And then if they avoid too much, either they end up actually separating or divorcing, which I think 40% of marriages in Canada, that's the end result, or they start to lead parallel lives. Because why would you want to go into a space that's not very nice? So that's a real that's the fourth piece of the puzzle is to really protect that it's sacred space, holy ground. There's enough negativity out there. You don't need to bring any into the relationship. So no blame, shame, or criticism. And again, people have to learn to talk to each other about it, because some of it's unconscious, like being dismissed. He wasn't aware. She wasn't aware until they recognized it. Then they can talk about it. Then they can deal with it differently. So again, it's an important piece of the puzzle, I think. And so then the fifth piece is to commit to zero negativity. If you think about it logically, it's impossible to have a great relationship if there's negativity. Negativity causes anxiety. If you feel anxious, you don't feel safe. You don't feel safe, hard to be intimate. So these two go together. That the space between, it's a real energy field. It's not just a metaphor. And so the commitment is to no negativity in there. And again, how do you make this more conscious? So one of the ways I use, and it sounds a bit whatever, I don't know, but it forces people to look at it. So I get them to get a calendar, like here. So this is March now, but this was February. Anyway, so then at the end of each day, the two people, the partners, would before they go to bed, take a look at the back of the day and see if there was any negativity in the day. And the caveat here is it's the person on the receiving end who determines whether it's negative or not. It's the person on the receiving end who determines whether it's negative or not. Because I could say, well, I'm just kidding. But if it hurts my partner, I'm the one who needs to stop. Okay. And so what I have them do is if there's no negativity, put a smiley face. If there's negativity, put a frowny face. And you say, come on. But it's a visual, and it forces people to look at the day. And at the start, it would be at the end of the day. Let's look back at the day, and what happened there at breakfast, not very good. So it's a frowny face. Or, gee, it was a great day. We had a great day. Everything was perfect. And then as they get better at it, then I would encourage them to redo it more quickly, just when it happens. So and to reconnect, because negativity is anything that helps a couple disconnect or force them to disconnect, or there's a disconnect in the relationship. So if suppose I said something and right away in my head I said that didn't work, I could ask my wife can I redo that and send it differently. That's one way, okay, to correct it. Another way would be, my wife could say, you know what, it would have been more helpful for me if you waited till later, or you said it differently, or you said this or did that. She could model for me what would be better. Okay. Another way is just to apologize, or give her a hug, or get her flowers, or some act of I screwed up. I'm sorry. I want to reconnect. And sometimes you might have to have a dialogue. Sit down and talk about what happened, like the dismiss thing. It would take more than maybe just a hug or let me redo it. We have to talk about it. And then, people can make up their own. But the point of this, again, the idea of the calendar of these smiley, frowny faces is just to bring to awareness, to move it from the unconscious to the conscious. That didn't work. Remember, it's the person on the receiving end who determines if it didn't work or not. And then talk about it. But again, you have to talk about it in a safe way. So you start to see how these pieces all fit together. It's not rocket science. It's not. But there's some key things that either you have to do or you can't do. And then as the other side of that, so the fourth piece was to recognize the importance of the space between, no negativity in the space between. The fifth is zero negativity, and then to amplify the positives. So to refill that space between with positives. Remember at the romantic love stage, it was pretty positive. So what we're saying is, to consciously amplify the positives. I appreciate that. Hey, you did a great job. Thanks a lot. And to say that stuff out loud. Because again, from an old brain point of view, if I'm constantly hearing from you, hey, thanks a lot, I appreciate it, you did a great job, my old brain can relax. This is not the enemy over there. This is my ally. We're in this together. Okay. So that's the fifth piece, to commit to zero negativity and try to somehow pay attention to that. The calendar is simply one way. And then the other side of that coin is to really amplify the positive, to really appreciate each other and to say that stuff out loud. All right. And to refill that space between and make it a really positive place to be. So again, what I would encourage you is that if you have questions, or you want more information, or you have something that would maybe help me, or it wasn't clear or something, if you just write in connect, maybe in the chat box, I'll pick that up later, and we can make either on Messenger, or we can phone or talk to each other, email, whatever we can do, but we'll get back together again. So again, just to review, okay, like I said, I believe that Harville and Helen have really cracked the code on relationship, especially with their understanding that you're probably partnered with somebody who has some of the positive but also negative traits of your parents. But then the other piece of the puzzle, for me, the importance of safety. If you don't feel safe with the thing, it's 500 million years. But you're probably partnered with somebody who, especially at the start, you probably won't be able to meet all their needs, or not in the way they would prefer. So then the key skill, of course, you have to learn to talk to each other in a safe way. You can attack or withdraw. And then the importance of the space between, that's a real energy field, and you want to keep no blame, shame, or criticism in that energy field. Keep it free of all negativity. So the zero negativity, you pledge and consciously, like we asked for 30 days, to work on that. And I'll have clients, that the first week or two, there's a lot of frowny faces. By week 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, very few. Mostly smiley faces, because they've learned to shift that around. And then the other side of the coin is to really appreciate each other and be thankful, and to say that stuff, and to a challenge my wife and I took this a year ago, for a month. We said we would do 3 appreciations a day, no repetitions. 3 repetitions a day, or 3 appreciations a day, no repetitions. So she's a great cook. So I say, well, that was a really good dinner. I can't say that for the rest of the month. I mean, I can still say it, but it doesn't count. And what it forced both of us to do is to really pay attention, because so often your partner does all kinds of things for you that you just take for granted. And this would force us to really pay attention to, you know, how great she is, and to say, geez, I really appreciate it. It could be, you know, how you laugh with the kids, or how you know, what you dress like, or what you know, anyway, it forced you to pay attention. And we both realized it was good for both of us. So it was a bit of a challenge. Anyway, so again, thanks very much for joining me. If you have comments or questions, just type in the questions. I believe the tools are available in today's world to have the relationship of your dreams. This will go up on, I am recording it, so it's going to go up on YouTube, and my YouTube channel is the Relationship Wizard. And so if you found it valuable and you can share it with somebody else, that would be great, because my goal is to get this message out to as many people as I can, because I think the tools are available to have the kind of relationship we all want. But the statistics are against us right now, and I think hopefully this can be helpful. So
you schedule to get over the negativity sometimes?
I'm sorry.
How do you get over the negativity? Do you bring up a meeting or right away?
Yeah.
Or later?
Well, yeah. So if it was something negative, then I could say, you know, time out. Let's either redo that, or it would be better this way, or you have a conversation about it. And that's the safe conversation thing. You have to talk. You have to be able to talk to each other about it.
Okay, thanks.
But part of it, just bring it to awareness. Anyway, there you go. Thanks very much. Have a great day, and thanks for watching.
Great, good job. Way to go.
Thanks, Dwyer. Thanks, Dwyer, for being my cheerleader. Okay, cheerio.
No.
See you guys.
Stuff. Good stuff.
Cheerio. If I can get out of here now. Stop share. Okay, stop share. Oh, there we are. Okay. All right. I gotta stop recording now too.